Hello, and welcome to Autonomous Medical Robotics 101, Revolutionizing Surgery. I'm Alex Clug, your host, and this is the first episode of our podcast series. Today, we're going to dive deeper into a fascinating topic, autonomous surgical robots. What they are, how they work, and how they're revolutionizing surgery. Now, don't worry if you're not an engineer or surgeon, we'll keep things accessible and jargon-free. Whether you're a curious listener, a MedTech professional, an investor eyeing the next big innovation, or a student exploring the field, there's something here for you. So let's get started on understanding the fundamentals of autonomous surgical robotics and why they're such a big deal for patients and healthcare systems alike. So what are autonomous surgical robots? You may have heard of robot-assisted surgery. Perhaps the famous Da Vinci surgical system comes to mind. Robotic surgery itself isn't brand new. Since the early 2000s, systems like the Da Vinci have helped surgeons perform minimally invasive procedures with robotic arms controlled from a console. These systems give surgeons a better view and steadier hands. Literally, the robot filters out any hand tremors for smooth precision. But importantly, they are not autonomous. In a system like Da Vinci, the robot does nothing on its own. Every movement is guided in real time by the surgeon. Think of it like a highly advanced tool or an extension of the surgeon's hands. So what do we mean by autonomous surgical robots? Well, in simple terms, we're talking about robots that can perform certain tasks or decisions during surgery with minimal human intervention. It's a spectrum. We're not yet at the point of a robot completely replacing a surgeon, but we are seeing robots that can carry out specific steps of an operation on their own once given a plan or parameters. For example, some orthopedic surgical robots can automatically cut bone along a pre-planned path with incredible accuracy. The surgeon programs the plan and the robot executes it, much like an autopilot in a plane following a course set by the pilot. These systems have been mostly used for very structured tasks on hard tissues, like prepping a hip or knee for an implant, because bones don't move around and are easier for a robot to work on. The real challenge and frontier for autonomy is in soft tissue surgery. Think of surgeries on organs like the heart, intestines, etc. They move and flex. Soft tissues pose unique challenges. They can shift as a patient breathes or bleed unexpectedly, and they're not one size fits all. Amazingly, researchers are already tackling this. In 2022, a team at Johns Hopkins demonstrated a robot that can autonomously stitch together two ends of an intestine in a pig, a procedure known as anastomosis. The robot, fittingly named STAR for Smart Tissue Autonomous Robot, was able to adjust to the subtle movements of the tissue and place sutures with precision. In fact, it performed better than expert human surgeons in these tests. This was the first known case of a robot performing a complex soft tissue operation largely on its own, a huge milestone that shows what's on the horizon. To sum up, an autonomous surgical robot is one that doesn't just passively wait for a surgeon's every command. Instead, it can make some decisions or movements on its own based on advanced programming, sensors, and even AI. It's like the difference between driving a car yourself versus using a car with adaptive cruise control or self-parking. The latter still requires you, but it can handle certain tasks automatically. In surgery, this means a robot might be entrusted with, say, closing a wound or precisely positioning an instrument under the watchful eye of the surgical team. So, how do these autonomous surgical robots work? Now that we know what they are, let's talk about how they actually work. At a high level, an autonomous surgical robot combines several cutting-edge technologies. One is the robotic hardware. These are the robotic arms and instruments that actually interact with the patient. They are built for extreme precision and stability. The robot's hands can move in ways a human wrist never could, rotating freely in tight spaces. Modern surgical robots can scale motion. For instance, translating a large hand movement at the console into a tiny, delicate motion inside the patient, and eliminate any hand tremors, enabling very fine control. This hardware gives the robot the physical capability to execute delicate tasks with steadiness and repeatability that would be hard for a person to match unaided. Next, imaging, and sensing. Vision is a big part of how these robots work. They use high-resolution 3D cameras and sometimes other imaging like ultrasound or CT scans to see the surgical field. An autonomous robot often has to know where things are: critical blood vessels, the edges of a tumor, the exact orientation of a bone, etc. Advanced systems create a 3D map of the patient's anatomy. For example, before an autonomous orthopedic robot cuts bone, it uses scans to map the bone and plan the cuts within fractions of a millimeter. In soft tissue surgery, sensors can track movement, like the rise and fall of a breathing lung, and adjust accordingly. In the experimental STAR robot, which we talked about earlier, cameras and special markers were used so the robot could see the edges of the tissue it needed to sew, even as those edges moved slightly with each breath. Next, you got the software and AI. This is the brain of the system. Autonomous robots run on sophisticated software that can include artificial intelligence and machine learning. In fact, some of the latest surgical robots are explicitly being designed with AI and deep learning at their core. AI algorithms can help in a few ways. They might plan the surgical approach, for instance, analyzing images to figure out the safest path for an instrument to take to a tumor. They might also guide the robot's movements in real time, detecting if something isn't as expected and adjusting on the fly. For example, if an autonomous robot is suturing a tissue and it notices the tissue has shifted, it could pause and alert the surgeon or replan that stitch on its own. Deep learning models can be trained on thousands of surgical cases to recognize patterns, like distinguishing healthy tissue from diseased tissue in an image, or knowing the normal range of force to apply when cutting or stitching. This intelligence is what allows a robot to do more than just blindly follow a preset path. It enables adaptive, context-aware actions. One company, for instance, is developing a platform that integrates AI and deep learning in its surgical robots to continuously improve their decision-making capabilities. Next, human supervision and control. Importantly, even an autonomous robot doesn't just run off and do surgery alone in a room. There's always a surgeon in the loop, monitoring and ready to intervene. The autonomy in current and near future systems is conditional, meaning the robot might carry out a task by itself, but under the conditions and boundaries set by the human team. A good example is that STAR experiment. The robot could place stitches by itself, but a surgeon was supervising and the robot would ask for human input if something went outside the expected conditions. The philosophy in the field is very much about partnering humans with robots. The robot can handle the nitty-gritty of precision movements while the surgeon provides judgment and oversight. As one leading researcher put it, autonomous robots are designed to be incorporated into the surgical workflow alongside surgeons to enhance what surgeons do, not replace them. So, in practice, the autonomous surgical procedure might go like this. The patient is imaged, say with a CT scan, and a surgical plan is made, possibly with AI assistance. The surgeon reviews and approves that plan, for example, where to make incisions or how to approach a tumor. Then, in the operating room, the robot, guided by that plan and its sensors, carries out the task with the surgeon supervising. If at any point the robot encounters something it isn't sure about, like unexpected anatomy or movement, it can pause and ask for guidance, or the surgeon can take over manually. It's a bit like autopilot in modern aircraft. Under routine conditions, it does great, but a human pilot is always there watching the instruments and can take control if needed. So, now let's talk about the benefits, precision, and improved outcomes. One of the biggest reasons autonomous surgical robots are attracting attention is the promise of even greater precision and consistency, which can translate to better patient outcomes. Surgery is a field where precision is critical. A few millimeters can be the difference between successfully removing a tumor and damaging a vital organ. Humans, even the best surgeons, have natural limits. Hands can shake, fatigue can set in during a long procedure, and no two surgeons perform a procedure exactly the same way. Robots, on the other hand, excel at repetition and steadiness. They don't get tired or shaky, and they can execute the same motion over and over with micron-level accuracy. So let's break down some key benefits. Greater precision. Robots can make extremely fine movements without any tremor, For example, a surgical robot can be instructed to move an instrument 5 millimeters, and it will do exactly that, no more, no less. This precision is especially helpful in delicate surgeries like neurosurgery or eye surgery, and in operating on tiny structures. Some robotic systems have been used for procedures on blood vessels just a few millimeters wide. In autonomous mode, the robot can follow an optimal path very consistently. In autonomous sewing, suturing, tasks like the STAR robot demonstration, every stitch can be placed at the perfect interval and tension. In fact, the Johns Hopkins team noted that with the robot, not a single stitch was missed or placed suboptimally, whereas humans sometimes make tiny errors that can lead to complications. As one expert pointed out, every one missed stitch in something like bowel surgery can cause a leak and infection, so eliminating those errors can make surgeries much safer. Another benefit, stability in complex tasks. Consider heart surgery. Operating on a beating heart is notoriously difficult. The surgeon has to deal with a moving target. In some robotic heart procedures, the robot's software can compensate for that movement. One pioneering cardiac surgeon, Dr. Sudhir Srivastava, set records by performing robotic bypass surgeries on beating hearts, a procedure known as TCAB, something nearly impossible with humans' hands alone. The robot can synchronize with the heart's motion or remain rock steady while the heart moves around it. Autonomous features could further improve this by, say, auto-adjusting in real time to heartbeats. The result is the ability to do surgeries that are less invasive. No need to stop the heart or open the whole chest, while maintaining accuracy and safety. Next benefit, consistency and reduced variation. With autonomous systems, the goal is that every patient gets the same high level of care. If a robot is executing a critical part of the procedure, it will do it the same way every time, according to best practices programmed into it. This could reduce variability in outcomes between different hospitals or surgeons. It's like having a master surgeon's technique available everywhere. In fact, one vision of companies developing these robots is to decentralize excellence, making advanced surgery accessible to patients in community hospitals or developing countries, not just elite medical centers. By embedding the expertise into the machine, even less experienced surgical teams can achieve top-tier results as long as they have the technology. Next, improved minimally invasive surgery, known as MIS. Robotic systems, autonomous or not, enable more procedures to be done with tiny incisions instead of large cuts. MIS means less trauma, less blood loss, and faster recovery. Autonomy can push MIS further by handling tasks that are so delicate or tedious that doing them by hand would be impractical. For instance, sewing up internal tissue laparoscopically is hard for humans. Imagine tying a knot with long instruments through a small hole. Robots can not only make it easier under direct control, but even autonomously perform such suturing, sewing, which could shorten operating times and ensure a perfect closure each time. Patients benefit through lower complication rates and quicker healing. Indeed, studies of robotic surgery show low rates of complications like infections or conversions to open surgery, often just a few percent, and those rates could drop further if robots handle the most error-prone steps. The consistency of robot-assisted moves also means fewer surgical mistakes. In the STAR experiment, the autonomous robot stitched intestines with significantly fewer errors than human surgeons, hinting at a future where surgical errors, like imprecise sutures or slight misplacements, could be greatly reduced. And finally, surgeon ergonomics and fatigue reduction. While this is a more indirect benefit to patients, it's worth noting. Robotic systems allow surgeons to operate while sitting comfortably at a console, rather than standing in contorted positions for hours. Less surgeon fatigue means they can maintain peak performance throughout the case. When autonomy takes over some tasks, even if just for a few minutes, the surgical team gets a brief respite or can use that time to prepare for the next steps, double-check the robot's work, etc. A more rested, focused surgeon is less likely to make mistakes when they do step in. Over a long surgery, having the robot do some of the heavy lifting, whether it's holding instruments steady or completing a tedious suturing task, can improve the overall outcome by preventing human error due to tiredness. In summary, Autonomous surgical robots aim to combine the best of both worlds: the judgment and experience of skilled surgeons with the precision, steadiness, and tirelessness of machines. The end result for patients can be surgeries that are safer, more precise, and less invasive, leading to faster recoveries and better long-term results. So, autonomous versus traditional surgical approaches. How do autonomous robotic surgeries differ from traditional surgical approaches? Well, let's paint the contrast clearly. First, you got open surgery, traditional surgery. In a traditional open surgery, a surgeon makes a large incision to directly see and access the anatomy. They use their hands and handheld tools, scalpel, clamps, to perform the procedure. The success relies 100% on the surgeon's skill and steadiness. It's like a craftsman working with basic hand tools. This approach can be very effective, but it's invasive, meaning more pain, bigger scars, and longer recovery for patients, since cutting through large areas of tissue causes trauma. And then you have conventional, minimally invasive surgery, MIS. Techniques like standard laparoscopy also rely on the surgeon's hands, but through small incisions using long instruments and a camera. Here, the surgeon is looking at a screen and moving instruments indirectly, which is tricky. It's a bit like trying to tie your shoes using long chopsticks by looking at a mirror. It's less invasive than open surgery, but it's technically demanding for the surgeon and still limited by human dexterity and 2D visualization. Then you have robot-assisted surgery, teleoperated robots. Systems like the Da Vinci changed the game by providing a computer-enhanced interface. The surgeon sits at a console with high-definition 3D vision and controls robotic arms that mimic the surgeon's hands movement, but scale them down and steady them. This approach retains the surgeon in full control, but the robot technology makes the surgeon's job easier and more precise. In essence, the robot acts as a very fancy set of surgical hands. This has become quite common. To give a sense of scale, by the end of 2021, over 10 million robotic surgeries have been performed worldwide using systems like these. In certain specialties, robot-assisted surgery is now the dominant method. For instance, nearly 87% of prostate cancer surgeries in the US were done with robotic assistance by 2019 because of the precision and quicker recovery it offers for patients. Then you have autonomous or semi-autonomous surgery. Building on robot-assisted surgery, autonomy introduces a shift in who or what is executing the surgical action. Instead of the surgeon directly manipulating every move, the surgeon now guides and oversees, while the robot executes some parts automatically. The fundamental difference is that the robot has some decision-making capability. In practice, today's autonomous surgeries are collaborative. The robot might perform a task like placing a series of sutures or drilling holes for a surgical screw, while the surgical team monitors and handles everything else. Traditional surgery has no such delegation. The surgeon must do everything manually. With autonomy, we essentially delegate certain tasks to an extreme reliable assistant. This can make surgeries more efficient. The robot might do a task faster or concurrently while the surgeon does another. And as mentioned, more consistent. Another key difference is in planning. Autonomous systems often involve a lot of pre-operative planning using data. Surgeons might spend time before the operation programming the robot or reviewing an AI-generated plan. In a traditional surgery, much of the decision-making and planning also happens beforehand, but adjustments are all made on the fly by the human. In an autonomous scenario, the robot also adjusts on the fly, but based on algorithms and sensor input. Finally, you have remote and telesurgery capability. One of the remarkable advantages of robotic surgery is the potential for remote operation. A surgeon can operate the robot from a different location, even across the world. This has been demonstrated even in non-autonomous robots. Now, when you add more autonomy, you reduce the burden on real-time, high-bandwidth communication because the robot can handle some actions itself. This opens the door wider for telesurgery, where the specialist and patient don't have to be in the same place. In fact, just recently, a surgical robotics company in India achieved the world's first robotic cardiac telesurgery on a patient located about 1,200 miles away. A heart surgery from 1,200 miles away. Take a moment to appreciate how revolutionary that is. The procedure was made possible by a robotic system that could be partly controlled remotely and had the reliability to execute delicate movements across that distance. Traditional surgery obviously can never do that. A surgeon can't reach 1,200 miles with their hands, so autonomous and robotic approaches are breaking geographical barriers. A top surgeon in New York could one day operate via robot on a patient in a rural village, with a robot handling the fine details and the local team assisting. This could truly democratize access to care, a stark contrast to the old paradigm where patients must travel to where the surgeon is. So in comparing these approaches, it's clear that autonomous robotic surgery is not here to replace traditional surgery outright, but to enhance and expand it. For surgeons, it means shifting from being the sole operator to being a team leader working with a robotic partner. For patients, it means they might be operated on with smaller incisions, the super steadfast mechanical hand involved, and possibly even have access to specialized procedures that weren't available locally before. Traditional surgery techniques and surgeon expertise remain absolutely critical. In fact, they guide how robots are built and used, but the tools and methods are evolving rapidly. Okay, so let's talk about some real-world examples and applications. This all sounds great in theory, but it is also happening in practice. Let's look at some real-world examples that show autonomous and robotic surgical systems in action. Orthopedic surgery automation. If you or someone you know has had a knee or hip replacement recently, there's a good chance a robot was involved. Systems like T-Solution 1 and others, like Stryker's Mako robot, are used to automate the precise cutting of bone for implants. The surgeon inputs the plan, tailored to the patient's CT scans, and the robot executes that plan with sub-millimeter accuracy. These are FDA-approved systems already in operating rooms. They represent level 2 autonomy, task automation. The robot handles one specific task autonomously. The outcome has been very positive. Studies show that using robots in joint replacements can improve the alignment and fit of implants, which may help them last longer and reduce complications. From a patient's perspective, most importantly, it means a potentially more durable joint replacement and sometimes even a quicker recovery because the cuts are so precise, there's less trauma to surrounding tissue. Another real-world example, robot-assisted soft tissue surgeries. For soft tissue, heart, lung, abdomen, etc., the Da Vinci system is currently the workhorse worldwide. But again, that's surgeon control. In terms of autonomy, the STAR project I discussed before is a cutting-edge example in the lab setting, sewing intestines in a pig autonomously. However, there are also semi-autonomous features creeping into commercial soft tissue surgical robots. For example, some robotic systems have an automated camera positioning. The robot's vision will adjust and center the view on where the surgeon is working without the surgeon having to manually move the camera. This is a small autonomy feature, but it makes the workflow smoother. Researchers and companies are working on more advanced cases, like automatic tumor detection and cutting. Imagine a robot that could, say, detect the boundary of a tumor in the liver using infrared imaging and then cut it out following that boundary, all while the surgeon oversees it. While fully autonomous soft tissue surgery on human isn't here yet, these incremental features are paving the way. In the spirit of real-world developments, it's worth mentioning what's happening globally, not just in the US. One notable example I'd like to cover is SS Innovations, a company that is starting to make news for bringing advanced surgical robots to places like India at a lower cost than most of what's out there right now. For full disclosure, I was a co-founder of the original company that later became SS Innovations, and am now a senior advisor to them. They developed the SSI Mantra surgical robot. While not fully autonomous in the sci-fi sense, it's an advanced platform that has performed over 5,000 surgeries across multiple hospitals and multiple types of surgeries. These include complex procedures like robotic heart surgeries, and impressively, they have so far reported 0 device-related complications in any of all those surgeries, including the cardiac ones. What sets efforts like this apart is the focus on accessibility and affordability. Their mission is to make robotic surgery available to underserved populations, decentralizing excellence, as we discussed earlier. The fact that about 100 of these systems have already been installed across 75 hospitals in such a short time, now most of them are in India for now and in several other developing countries, shows a real-world impact. And as noted, this was the team that accomplished the remote heart surgeries. It underscores that robotic surgery isn't just a luxury for rich hospitals, it's spreading worldwide and saving lives in places that lack access to specialists. Think of this number. 7 billion people have access to only 5% of the medical robotic systems installed in the world. This trend of bringing the benefits of robotic surgery, what we call the forgotten world, is only possible because costs are gradually coming down and because the technology is proving its worth in its positive outcomes. So we see growing widespread adoption in various specialties. Beyond heart and ortho, we see robots in neurosurgery, where robots assist in placing electrodes in the brain with extreme precision for procedures like epilepsy surgery. In ophthalmology, experimental robots can do portions of eye surgery more finely than a human hand could. And in radiology, interventional procedures, robotic catheters can navigate blood vessels autonomously guided by imaging. A lot of these are still under active development, but it's an exciting spectrum. In urology and gynecology, robot-assisted surgery with systems like Da Vinci is already extremely common. For instance, by 2018, over 60% of hysterectomies in the US were done robotically, and that number has surely grown since then. These are largely surgeon-controlled robots, but they set the stage for adding more autonomy, like guided stitching. Another application worth noting is how autonomy and AI assist in training the next generation of surgeons. Some robotic systems come with simulators and AI coaches that can autonomously assess a trainee's performance and guide them. For example, a training platform might watch how a trainee moves the instruments and provides feedback or even intervene if they are about to make an error, kind of like driving instructor's brake pedal. This educational autonomy helps standardize surgical training, which again benefits patients in the long run. A system called SSI Maya by SS Innovations, for example, is a mixed reality training platform that leverages such concepts, allowing surgeons to practice in virtual or remote settings. All these examples highlight that autonomous and robotic surgery is not just theory. It's happening in operating rooms and research labs around the world. Importantly, the trend is accelerating. A decade ago, we mostly had one big robotic player, Intuitive Surgical with Da Vinci, and everything was manual control. Now we have many companies in the fray and increasing levels of automation being introduced. In fact, the proportion of surgeons using robotic surgery has skyrocketed. In 2012, only about 8.7% of surgeons were using robots, but by 2022, that figure was around 45%. Nearly half of surgeons have adopted some robotic techniques in just 10 years. That trend speaks to the real-world value clinicians are finding in these tools. Hospitals are investing in robots because patients often seek out robotic-assisted procedures due to the perceived better outcomes. And surgeons are advocating for them because they extend what the surgeon can do. From an investor or industry perspective, surgical robotics is a booming area. Companies like SS Innovations have even gone public, which just uplisted to the NASDAQ earlier this year, reflecting the confidence that this technology is both medically and commercially significant. We also see partnerships between tech firms and hospitals, and ventures into AI-driven surgery from companies big and small. It's a space where innovation is rapid, and competition is bringing better solutions to the market, which ultimately benefits patients. So what is the future potential and impact on healthcare? What does the future hold for autonomous medical robotics, and what could it mean for patients and healthcare systems? In one word, transformation. We are looking at a future where surgeries might be performed by a combination of human and machine intelligence, yielding outcomes that we today would call remarkable. Here are some future directions and their potential impact. Increasing levels of autonomy. As AI and robotics tech improve, we can expect surgical robots to take on more complex tasks autonomously. We might move from today's level 2 or 3 autonomy, which is task automation and conditional autonomy for specific tasks, towards higher levels. One day, a robot might handle an entire routine procedure start to finish, with the surgeon just overseeing multiple operations at once. For example, imagine an autonomous robot that can perform a straightforward appendectomy on its own, which is the removal of an appendix. This might sound far-fetched, but all the building blocks are coming together. Advanced imaging, AI planning, precision instruments, and lots of data from past surgeries to learn from. If and when this happens, it could greatly increase surgical capacity. A single specialist could supervise several simultaneous robotic surgeries, meaning more patients treated with fewer delays. This, by the way, could help with the real-world and seemingly growing problem of the shortage of doctors. Next, broader access to care. One of the most exciting prospects is making quality surgery more accessible globally. Today, a big problem in healthcare is that in many regions there are not enough specialist surgeons. Autonomous robots could help bridge that gap. Here's a future scenario. A small hospital in a rural area has a robotic surgical system. There's no top surgeon on site for, say, complex tumor removal, but the robot is there and a specialist from a city hospital can telementor or oversee it. The robot, loaded with specialist knowledge and AI guidance, can perform critical parts with a local team handling support. This means patients won't always need to travel to big cities for advanced procedures. The care comes to them. Also, because robots can work around some human resource limitations, humanitarian efforts could deploy robotic surgery units to disaster zones for underserved areas and remotely treat patients. In the long run, as the tech matures and hopefully becomes cost-effective, we might see autonomous surgical pods in places that have never had access to certain surgeries before. This aligns with the goal of companies like SS Innovations to make surgery affordable and reachable worldwide. It could drastically reduce healthcare disparities in our world. Next, emergency and remote surgery. Imagine, battlefield or space. We touched on telesurgery across distances on Earth, but consider even more extreme cases. Both NASA and the military have been very interested in robotic surgery. Actually, the first medical robot was developed by the US government for remote surgery in, for example, a space shuttle. But technical limitations back then, such as too much latency, caused it to fail. By the way, that is the project that was taken up by Dr. Fred Moll, the founder of Intuitive Surgical, and gave us the Da Vinci robot. Researchers are developing compact surgical robots that could be sent on space missions or deployed on battlefields. In these scenarios, you often cannot have a full surgical team on site. A robot that can autonomously stabilize a wounded soldier or an astronaut is invaluable. In fact, a mini robot called Mira, M-I-R-A, is being tested for use in space, with hopes that one day it might perform emergency surgeries autonomously on astronauts millions of miles away. It's like science fiction becoming reality. A robot may save someone's life on Mars or in a war zone, doing the best it can until human surgeons can follow up. The impact here is obvious. More lives saved where human surgeons can't reach in time. Then we can talk about integration with other technologies. The future will likely see surgical robots integrated with other advanced tech. Picture robots working hand in hand with augmented reality guidance, AR for short. A surgeon wearing AR glasses sees the patient's anatomy highlighted, critical structures flashing in their view, and the robot's plan overlaid on the patient. Or robots combined with advanced imaging like real-time MRI or ultrasound to see things beneath the surface and adapt mid-surgery. We might even see nanorobots or micro-robots someday doing autonomous procedures that at a microscopic scale, like clearing a blood clot from inside an artery. While that's further out, the continuous miniaturization of robotics and improvement in computing suggests that surgery could be less and less invasive. Imagine surgeries with almost no incision at all, just robots navigating through blood vessels or natural orifices to the target, all autonomously guided by AI that knows the body's map. So, what about the impact on our healthcare systems? For hospitals and health systems, robotic automation in surgery could mean a shift in how we plan operating rooms and train staff. We might need fewer surgeons to achieve the same or greater surgical volume, which could help mitigate the projected surgeon shortages in the future. However, it also means retraining surgeons to work with and trust these systems. Surgical teams might include more engineers or technicians as integral members. Cost is a consideration. Surgical robots are expensive today, but competition and innovation are already driving costs down. If autonomous robots can prove not only that they improve outcomes, but also that they can shorten surgery times or reduce complication rates, they could save costs in the long run. Shorter hospital stays, fewer complications, equals less expense. Health insurers and governments would take note of that. We may see a day where not using a robot for certain procedures is considered suboptimal care, much like how certain advanced imaging or diagnostic AI tools become standard of care. And most importantly, the patient experience. From the patient's point of view, a successful surgery is often one that was minimally disruptive to their life. Autonomous robotics could make surgeries quicker and recovery easier. Some experts predict we'll move more surgeries to an outpatient setting, meaning you don't have to stay overnight in a hospital, because robots can make procedures so refined that trauma is minimal. Also, there's an interesting possibility. If robots handle more of the procedure, the variability in outcome should decrease, so patients can be more confident in what to expect. It could reduce the dependence on finding a one-star surgeon because the technology helps every surgeon achieve star-level results. Psychologically, patients might need reassurance. Not everyone will be immediately comfortable hearing a robot will do your surgery. Building trust will be key. Over time, though, as these systems prove themselves, having a robot assistant or autonomous steps in your surgery may become as routine as having anesthesia. Of course, with all this potential comes new questions and challenges. We must consider how to regulate and validate autonomous surgical actions, ensuring a robot is safe and effective before it operates on people. There are ethical questions. Can a machine make life and death decisions? How do we handle liability if an autonomous step goes wrong? Is it surgeon's fault, the hospitals, the manufacturers? These are big topics worthy of their own deep discussions, perhaps in a future episode. The short answer is that any autonomous system will undergo rigorous testing and will likely be introduced gradually. Early autonomous surgeries will probably be in scenarios where the risk of an error is low, or the robot can be closely supervised and the human can instantly take over if needed. Despite these challenges, the trajectory of innovation strongly suggests that autonomous medical robots are here to stay and will only grow more capable. Surgeons who are just entering training now will likely work in an area where AI-assisted autonomous procedures are commonplace. Hospitals are already adapting, and patients will soon begin to see the benefits in terms of safer surgeries and broader access. So, in conclusion, as we wrap up this episode, let's recap. Autonomous surgical robots blend the precision of machines with the expertise of human surgeons. They are improving surgical precision, making procedures safer and less invasive, and even breaking the barriers of distance by enabling remote operations. We explored how they work, from smart algorithms to advanced robotic arms, and saw that this is not just theoretical future tech, but an evolving reality with thousands of surgeries already performed with robotic assistance and partial autonomy. The differences between traditional surgery are profound. We're moving from the era of handcrafted surgery to the era of co-created surgery between humans and robots. The future potential of this field is enormous. We could be on the cusp of a healthcare revolution where surgical care becomes more consistent and widely available, where your location matters less because a robot can bring a top surgeon's skills to you, and where even the most complex surgeries become routine and safe thanks to AI planning and robotic precision. It's an exciting time for medicine, technology, and for patients everywhere. I hope this episode has shed some light on how autonomous medical robots are revolutionizing surgery. The goal was to demystify the technology and highlight why it matters. If you found this discussion interesting, stay tuned. In future episodes, we'll continue exploring the cutting edge of MedTech. We might delve into specific case studies, talk with surgeons who use these robots, or address some big questions like ethics and training. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Alex Clug, and it's been a pleasure to walk you through this topic. Remember, the world of medical robotics is advancing rapidly, and what sounds like science fiction today could be saving someone's life tomorrow. Until next time, stay curious and take care.